You ready? Croeso, good evening everyone, and welcome to Britain's Hidden History number 115. And they say it would never last. Take it away, Zav. Here we are. As you can see, we are outside at my home. And in the background, you can see the hill, Eglwys where the famous ancient church, Eglwys Church, is. Well, that's not quite in view, although what you can almost see, to my side, just to give you an idea where I am, that way is the Garth. We can see the three mounds from the Belt of Orion, and over there you can see one of the monkey tumps there, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, hello, so thank you very much for your patience. I'm sorry again last week, I'm feeling a lot better. Thank you for so many messages. Thank you, Zev, that's very nice. I've had so many messages, get well, all this kind of stuff, good wishes and gifts, and God, it's been great. So I really felt the loves, and I'm feeling a lot better. I just get tired, that's what happens. I'm physically fine, just need more sleep. So well done, Marshall, first online, good evening, thank you, welcome back. Diane, Johnny, diolch yn fawr. Going to learn something tonight, hopefully. Oh, let's hope so. Yeah, let's a little bit about this evening's show. I'll say a few more hellos while people log on. Ian Briggs. Good evening. Yep, good chats going on there. Did you know, what's this? Vote for Matt Taylor MP. There we are, Brighton. There we go, Matt. I'm giving you a plug. That's the nearest I get to politics. Did you know the ancient Brits used to come to Brighton for their summer holidays? Yeah, I saw that article. I haven't had a chance to include it in the show yet. I have to try and put it in for next week. It is quite funny. Well, sort of funny in a serious way. It's to go to Brighton for holidays back in medieval times. I mean, how weird is that? Right, hello Meg, good to see you on board. Hello John Griffiths, evening all. Right, okay, loads of messages there, thank you very much. Alan Reese, evening. Right, now what I'm going to do tonight, and I take on a little bit of a challenge, and I thought with the extra week, I will have this cracked, no problem at all, but it's a big one. And it might take a couple of weeks to get through all of it, so we can sort of have a little, a delve will start, alright? We'll see how far we get. Before I fall over asleep, or it gets completely dark, or everyone just gives up and goes. Because what I'm going to try and do is talk a lot about the rewrites and how history gets rewritten. I'll do introduction now. Really, I think everyone's aware that there's a rewrite going on at the moment of our history. All right, now I'm not going into whether it's good or bad or what the politics are behind it, but I mean the way our history is presented is reframed. Our past is being, it's being presented in a more diverse way, a more multicultural way. It's a very different history to the one most of us learnt at school, and different parts are being emphasised. I don't get into all this kind of stuff, but we know what I'm talking about, right? There's a big political row going on and at the background. So, what we need to get to, though, is that this is not the first time this has happened. And without sounding too cliched, you've got the George Orwell situation where he explains that controlling the history is part of how you run a country. Maybe it's part of government. All right? We shouldn't be surprised. It's always been done throughout history. And the Orwellian, the classic Orwellian saying, you know, he who controls the past controls... he controls the... Get this right. Person who controls the present controls the past, and whoever controls the past controls the future. And that's always been the case, right? This is not a modern phenomenon, and it's not the 1940s when Orwell was writing primarily about the British government. Everyone thinks he's writing about Russia and things, but it's about Britain he was writing, where his job was at the BBC. But the big rewrite, the second stage, which people often forget, and I'm writing this into an extended essay, which I was hoping to have available. It's not quite finished. They'll be up in the next few days. Is the next stage of the process he describes is that it's important for the population then to forget that the change ever took place. This is the key. You have to forget that the change ever took place. And this is the situation that we're at the moment. This is what people like, particularly Wilson and Blackett, have been bringing out with their work, is to show that a major rewrite took place, focused around 1700. There goes a bit, obviously it goes on before then and after then, but this is kind of the focal point. And that's the history we've all been learnt. And it's been so successful, this idea, that no need have we learned to accept it. The people are really, really upset now to defend it, against the new changes that are coming in.
Someone donated £5.
Oh, wow, someone's donated a gift. Thank you very much. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, all right. I was in full flow then, but thank you, Leon. Thank you for the gift. Much help appreciated. Yes, so what was the situation whereby we've got the current situation, and of course the ones regular viewers will know about on here is it blows everyone's mind when you say it for the first time you hear it. The whole idea of Welsh, Scots and Irish being Celtic was invented. They're not Celtic before this period. Suddenly they become Celtic. The idea of the English being all Germanic and Anglo-Saxon, that also gets introduced in this period. And this is where it gets so difficult. So, yes, thank you very much, Shermanator. Much appreciated. Shermanator Osborne. Diolch. So, that's what we're going to look at. So what I'm going to try and do this evening, we've got loads of interesting little updates and things first, just to catch up on that. What I'm going to try and do, though, is give this is where it gets difficult, the politics of the 17th century, because that is, in many ways, that period from about, say, 1650 to sort of 1750, if you like, for convenience, that 100 years, is the most turbulent time in British history in many, many ways. And while we might think it's turbulent now with everything going upside down and everything, when you look at what was happening then, you can see it was even more. And when we have cases at the moment going on about online trolling and people being rude, I mean, those days, if you fell out, the person on the wrong side of the argument could end up at the end of a sword or the end of a rope, It was like for real. It wasn't just some nasty words on the internet or being trolled or even threatened. It was, it really was life or death. They were playing for keeps. Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, lovely view in the background. Right, okay, let's just pick up a couple of comments. Right, so I'm going to try and go on that. All right, so John Wixon's going with Christ lived in England. We sort of looked on that some other weeks, and we will come back to that subject. Dave Powell, the Ministry of Disinformation is still laughing about getting free citizens locked down. Yeah, well, it does all tie in, doesn't it? As you know, I try and avoid the contemporary politics, but I think you have to I get myself into too much trouble. Once you can see how these things work, and that I'll give you an example then. All right, like I often say to people who are very, should we say, cynical about what they call conspiracy theories or things being different, and that's to go through their own experience, particularly the older generation. It's not so much our living experience anymore, but if you look at the news reporting and how World War II was covered, you will see. I think everyone accepts there was huge amounts of propaganda. One of the most successful was, heroic operations like Dunkirk, which are actually a full-scale retreat. The military disaster becomes a heroic victory. Lots of things were not shown, and losing battles were ignored, and victories enhanced. Lots of propaganda exercises carried out, like collecting railings to make aeroplanes, even though they were never used. All these kind of things went on, and I think almost everybody accepts that. That's what you have to do in a war. You have to have control of information and propaganda to mobilise and to achieve all your objectives. And I think and most people accept that. I've never found anyone who doesn't accept that went on. And then what I ask him is then, so what point do you think that stopped? What point do you think... Was there a meeting sort of in the mid-50s or something, or 1945, war's over, victory over Japan, let's have a meeting with the cabinet and say, right, that's it now, right, we're gonna give up our control of the BBC, we're going to stop leaning on the media, from now on they can report exactly as they wish to. We have no more say in it, no more propaganda, we're out of it. Does anyone really think that meeting took place? But anyway, let's look. We'll go back. So let's have a look first of all. Got some fast, interesting updates. Something involving what's actually behind me on the wall. And I've still been tired, so I'm not quite fully on... I'm out of practice here. What are you looking at there, Leon? Oh, it's okay. I thought you'd see something in the background.
I thought I saw like a plane earlier.
Oh, an aeroplane. I can see the stripy skies from here really well. Right, okay, let's have a look. Here's what I've got from Joy Enigma. Regular viewer sent this in. This fantastic. It's a bit small. I need some glasses. Oh my goodness, can you see some glasses, please, Ange? This is fantastic. This is to CADW. Oh, hang on, I can't move that. I just realised because I'm using a notebook computer. That's the camera. So he's done a Freedom of Information request to CADW. For those who are not familiar, it's like English heritage, only it's Welsh heritage, if you like. And they are looking after the British, Welsh historical sites, monuments, and our history generally, the custodians, okay? You can have different definitions of the word CADW. CADW to keep safe or just to keep secret. But anyway, there's other versions of what CADW stands for. Right, but here's the one here we have. Thank you, my able assistant. So Johnny sent in a request for information about King Arthur, because that's a big part of what we do, yeah? So thank you for your request, which I received on 16th of June 2012. So it's quite going back a bit, but it's just as apt now. You asked for a list of items related to King Arthur that you have recorded in your catalogues, and any related correspondence and research studies that have been received and produced regarding such matters. Copies of documentation and materials relating to the above held in any form, such as paper and electronic records, including any subsequent emails concerning these subjects. My colleague wrote to you on 19th of June to advise that CADW has never itself commissioned any research into King Arthur. Never any research at all. And asked whether you would be more specific about your request. You did not respond to that request, so I've interpreted your request to cover items which have an identified connection to King Arthur in CADW's catalogue of sites. Please let me know if this is not an accurate description of the information you have requested. I have not found any information that falls into the description of items recorded at CADW sites. There is one reference. Can you turn that round a bit, Bill, so I can see it? There's a vague mention in CADW's Caerleon Roman Fortress, where reference is made to the local legend that the amphitheatre was the site of King Arthur's Round Table. As previously advised, CADW has not itself commissioned any research related to King Arthur. Any other research done by others which has been received by CADW unsolicited is already publicly available. So there you go. So that's what we're getting. A second, what's going on there? Okay, so as you can see, so we have to do this ourselves. There's no official activity taking place on a lot of whole chunks of Welsh history, okay? Right, here's an interesting one. So I'll just share this quickly with all our Britainshidden History fans, all our members. Maybe someone's looking for a change of lifestyle. There's a castle here. It's up in North Wales. And it's the Keykeeper. I'll put a link, sorry, it should be in the description. I'll copy all these links onto the description so you can have a look. And it's a strange place because the current person, their main job is to unlock and lock the doors every day. Because they don't have anyone suitable, because of health and safety, usual thing, the castle's now closed. That's in this staff situation. Oh, excuse me. Hang on a second. Oh, right. Hang on a second. Sorry, I will just jump to that quickly. I've got to try this on notebook now. It's not so easy. Can you see the comments there, Leon?
Yeah.
Okay. Hang on a second. Just bear with me. Sorry, folks. It is quite interesting to read some more of this. Not as well prepared as usual. That's quite funny, Mike. Not always very well prepared. Okay, let's just go through the article quickly. These things, I don't normally click accept on here, but as we've got a lot of people waiting. Right, so there it is. It's Dalwetherland Castle in Conway. It's close to the public, health and safety, because the locks on the doors or something great. It's a very important castle, and they're looking, it's a job. It's a job, you can live there. There you go. So a revised access route has been established, which now allows visitors free access to the castle. However, CADW has been unable to secure a new keykeeper for the monument due to concerns for the safety of visitors accessing the upper areas of the castle at all times of day and night. Unfortunately, the internal space of the castle had to be kept locked. CADW's website advises visitors the new route and that the castle is only viewable externally. You can't go in the castle. So there you go. It's funny, I remember when I was a boy with my parents going up to places like Harlech, which is like a really, really high castle, steep walls with cliffs below, and it wasn't even a rail. I remember looking down thinking, oh my goodness. So it is interesting how their attitudes towards health and safety have changed. Although, funny enough, I'd never ever heard of anyone falling off at Harlech. I think nature kicks in. You look at it and you think, that's frightening. Anyway, here we go. Hi Ross, this is from Simon Price. I love messages like this, so please send them in. There's an archaeological survey being done in the field off Longlands Lane, Margam, opposite the entrance to Margam Crematorium, across the A48 from Margam Abbey. Not sure what they're looking for. I delivered some machinery to the company doing the survey. Spoke to the archaeologist about King Morgan being buried at Margam Abbey. He didn't have a clue about any of the kings of Glamorgan. Some historian, eh? Now, I did a bit of digging around myself, excuse the pun, bit of research, and I came across this, which is rather cool, actually. This is page 1 of it here. I need to, again, I need the link on this one. Where's the link? I dig Margam. We're going to have to find it online here. And it's absolutely fantastic because I dig Margam. Oh, hang on, I got something different this time. There we are. I've typed in the search. Notes towards development of an accessible and sustainable future for Capel Myers, Holy Well. There we go. So please have a look at that. And what's interesting, what I found here, this isn't the one I found earlier. I don't have the link. I've had to change notebooks last minute. My computer failed. So I had all the links open on the other one. They're not open on this one, just to explain, okay? I think I should stick to being in the office from now on. So you got the Friends of Markham Park and everything. All this is very cool. But what I wanted to really look at was, hang on a sec, I'll just do a little bit from here, was this I Dig Margam project, which does look very good. And what they're doing there is encouraging children to get involved. So if you're from, I think my face is on the left, so the right is hiding it, but it says in the top left-hand corner, free for the young people of Neath and Port Talbot. And what it does then, archaeology for young people. I'll put the link up. You can find it yourself quite easily. Just put in sort of Margam Dig 2020. They're looking for volunteers. You can join in. They're doing wonderful stuff. What does surprise me, again, with all these things, and you can go through that feasibility study, be the same. Again, there's no real mention of the Welsh kings or sort of history that we look at. So that's a bit frustrating, the sort of Arthurian era. But still, it is very good. It's getting children involved. Speaking of volunteers, here's another great one, which I'd really look up this one. Just go to tumbarlam.co.uk and you'll find it, the Dig Tumbarlam 2022. Thank you to Richard Davis who put me onto this one, and also Richard Johnson and a couple of other people. This is tomorrow, okay? Get yourself up there. Just go up there and hopefully go up there at some point, do a bit of filming, interview some people, see how it's all going. If you want to join in, this would be, how cool would this be? A chance to do some archaeology at Tumbarlam and find out everything that's going on up there. They did a dig last year. They provided the report. Maybe I'll talk about that next week. And it looks fantastic. And another one, which Richard Davis is particularly involved in, is this litter picks, which are almost every week. And again, I suggest you get involved with that. And it's a really good community thing. Just the amount of rubbish is just crazy on the streets and the historical sites. I don't know how much that is to do with the fact it's quite difficult to get rid of your rubbish any other way, but there you go. Okay, so last chance to sign the petition. I'm going to close this down. If you see it on this hill behind me, this is just one of many hills in Wales. They're going to get absolutely covered in, first of all, the turbines and the what do you call them, the solar panels. And then the worry is then, I thought I had the next picture on there, on my other computer. Blast. Anyway, the next worry then is what Alan Wilson pointed out back in the 1980s, whereby the reason he always said they don't want to recognise historical sites on the hilltops is because at some point they want to access the millions and millions of tons of anthracite coal that's in those hills. And the way they do it these days is not to sink, not to do deep mining. They don't sink, a shaft and have men and equipment going up and down in a tunnel. These days, they get these absolutely giant machines. You should see them, and they just eat the hills and just cut the top straight off, and they just grind everything, and they can get every last ounce of coal out of it. But the hill is destroyed. It's completely destroyed. Just gets replaced with a tip afterwards. I know it sounds brutal, it sounds awful. That's what's coming, all right? That's what's coming. So first of all, you got the situation, if you look at the energy, it's nothing to do with energy, it's to do with money. We're already producing 2-3 times the energy required. It's all madness, but anyway, let's stay away from that. But please, last chance to sign the petition. So you can see the petition number. Why can't we see the petition number? So you should be able to get to that one. 1 second. Escape. Yeah, 245189, okay? 245189 for the website. So I will put the link up. Right. Come on, Rossi B. Right, so we're getting on to the main stuff now. But there's one other story. I didn't put his name down. I do apologise. He was in Britain's Hidden History group. He shared this article, which is very good timing. So it does fit in what we're talking about, the history in the 17th, 18th century, all getting, lost, if you like. Let's put it politely. Destroyed. And I'm going to share this little... sorry, you can't see that one. There we go. This is the idea of Cromwell Lloyd the First robbed Scotland of centuries of its history, okay? So let's look at the Scottish one first of all. And it gives you a pretty good idea how these things work. God, I'm really not with it, am I? Come on, Rossi B. Do better than this. Okay, so let's get that up there. Right, here we go. Now this is an interesting story because this is bang on for Britain's hidden history, how it works. Here's an example from 1660, okay? Well, it's not just 1660, as you'll see, but it focuses around there. But there's a portrait of Oliver Cromwell, actually Oliver Williams, of course, who had a claim to the throne via his Welsh heritage. And Oliver Williams had more of a claim to the throne than Charles, he was fighting against. There's a weird one, isn't it? And yet you won't find any history books which talk about King Oliver or his son being King Richard IV. That doesn't come into it. He's just put down as Lord Protector or something like that. It's all very strange. And I'd love to know more about what really happened under his rule, because the stories were fed, he tried to ban Christmas and life was miserable and everyone was very unhappy and there was extreme Puritanism and all this kind of thing. And yet, if you look at that era, particularly the 17th century, it seems one of the only time there was any peace. And it's proper democracy and a chance of a Commonwealth. So, there you go. Whereas Charles is a bit of a nutter and he gets the statues. Right, anyway, so this little story is interesting. For anyone who cares about Scottish history, the date December 18th, 1660 is one that should live in infamy. 1660, okay? That decade is absolutely crucial. Oh, Angie, can you get Architecture of Power as well, please? So what happened is that the treasure trove of Scottish history, you can read the whole article yourself. Right, so I'll just read some of this. So like conquerors everywhere around the world, two men who invaded and occupied Scotland took away the state records of the side of the nation being subjugated. One was King Edward I of England and the other was Oliver Cromwell. We can fairly blame them for the fact that compared to other ancient nations like England and France, Scotland has a giant dearth of written material recording our history up to the 16th century. I would say exactly the same with Wales and indeed with England, where the history was destroyed, which is what we're going to talk about this evening. Yes, many, many documents and artefacts were lost at the time of the Reformation, when John Knox's followers destroyed everything they felt was contaminated by Roman Catholicism. Now, John Knox is very interesting and well worth looking at. He was really stirring things up in this period. He's the one who really led the Reformation in Scotland. So this whole period is dressed, and this is one of the things I want to try and question. I'm going to go through, is everything is dressed up in terms of religious war between, well, in this case, different Protestants and Catholics is the obvious one, but also the different Protestant sects, even they were not happy with it. There was a lot of disagreement going on. And if you look at some of the contests, you'd actually end up with elements of Protestantism on the same side as the Catholics and things like that. One of the things I'm suspicious about is that this is this veneer is put on the top, where everything's described as a Catholic-Protestant war, whereas I think it's more, as always, to do with money and less to do with religion than we're led to believe. But John Knox is certainly a very devout man. And he spent his whole life campaigning, was in all sorts of trouble, was a galley slave on a French ship, held one of the queens to account. He did it all. He really did live it. And for no personal material gain or anything. So, anyway, so one of the things, though, because he was fervently anti-Catholic, I mean, there's no doubts about that, he was certainly, and his followers went about eradicating all traces of Catholicism in Scotland. But then you end up with a bizarre twist a little bit later on when it comes to the Jacobites, there's James and the Stewards coming back onto the throne. Their support, of course, comes from Ireland and the Catholic areas and into Scotland, and you get this support for a Catholic uprising by a Protestant country against a German king. The whole thing gets really weird. That's what we're going to get on to, okay? Let's look at a couple of comments there. We're talking about Celts in North Wales. As I understand it, the Civil War for Marchell kicked off when Charles I tried to impose his version of the prayer book on Scotland. I think that was one of the factors. There's quite a few things kicked off when they got locked out of the city of London, as the area I'm going to look more into. But yes, this is a horribly complicated time. Yes, thank you. That's been my last couple of weeks has been reading some very interesting books in this period, which I should just give a little bit of in the essay I've written. Oh, hang on. Hopefully I'm still on camera. This is Cambria Triumphant, 1661. We can see a very different version of history. And then what I think is an absolutely crucial book, there's 2 volumes of it. Origenes Celtae, Edwin Guest. This is an original. Cost me a lot of money years ago, before I even got into Wilson or Blackett. Why this book is absolutely crucial, and yet no one even knows about it. Alright, so that's what we're going to get to. Alright, we got a long way to go. Okay, so we can read about then. Anyway, I don't spend too long on this. But what you'll find... right, they were holding the documents, and there's a big argument, can they have the documents back or should they go? And what happened in the end, to cut the long story short, was the ship was sent to sail in bad conditions and it sunk, and they reckon say 90% what of the Scottish history which hadn't already been destroyed, but had been looked after, 90% never went back anyway. They went on this dodgy ship which sank off the Northumbrian coast, and it began to flounder. I always say flounder, it's founder. So the cargo consisted of 85 hogsheads of paper, possibly 2 tons in weight. We cannot be exactly sure of what's in those giant barrels, but early accounts say all the charters and records of King Robert the Bruce and his successor King David II were included, and many other state documents from the 14th and 15th centuries, from the records of the Scottish Parliament, which ordered an inquiry into the sinking. We know exactly what happened. We know what the inquiry said happened. Walt Young, a 21-year-old merchant's son who was a passenger, told the inquiry that Wemyss did not want the hogsheads aboard, but was pressed to do so by the Eagle's captain. With the weather worsening With the weather worsening somewhere off the Northumbrian coast, the Elizabeth of Land, which is already known to be a leaky ship, began to founder. So they kept bailing for a while, and before you know it, the ship's gone down and they've lost everything. The ship sank, and one historian estimated that 99% of Scottish national records for many decades went to the bottom. This loss is being felt to this day. So they ask quite a tragic story, and this kind of thing goes on. What's up?
Someone donated £2.
Oh, thank you, Brad. Donation for Brad.
He says,
Much appreciated.
BHH needs you.
BHH needs you. Yes, thank you. Right, so that's the. So thank you very much for that one. I'm sorry, I should put the name of the person up when it comes back to me. Frustrating. Yeah, so that was that story there. So another thing which I really want to draw people's attention to is that, and this might surprise people, I think, one of the sources, I've used a lot of this, is the ultimate in sort of mainstream, which is the Encyclopedia Britannica. So there you go. You can look at this, a lot of this stuff on online. But what's curious about it, which I love looking at the official accounts, is where the emphasis is placed on what's missing. All right, there's a lot missing for the account. Obviously, there's a lot in there. It's very detailed, and we'll have a little look at that in a second as well, okay? We'll jump into the online version, and you can see the story there and follow it out. Oh, thank you, Arnie B. Brought me some drinks. Keep me going. Thank you. All right, I'll just give just a quick glimpse just to get the flavour of it. So if you go to Encyclopedia Britannica, it's great then, because I just wanted to check, because some of the things I was finding just seemed crazy. And then you check through, it is all there, it's just the way these things are kind of dressed and hidden. And one of the big things, of course, is the revolution of 1688, which in fairness, they do call the revolution here. They don't just call it the glorious revolution. And in fact, it wasn't really a revolution. I mean, the more you look into it, it was an out-and-out foreign invasion. It was a coup. There's a bunch of very important people who got together and decided that they couldn't handle the current king. And the version, we're all told, everyone, and I'm sure it's true to a great extent, is that it was due to him being a Catholic. And they couldn't bear the fact he's being Catholic. Now, I don't know about you, it's always one of those things that's puzzled me. I've always had a fair... I always gone to church and that kind of stuff, even a Welsh Baptist and this kind of thing. But you realise in modern life how few people would... How many people out there would be prepared to die for the religion? You'd rather be executed than walk into a Catholic service, or the reverse, going to a Protestant church. It's always struck me as amazing the depth of faith and conviction that these people had. And I think in many ways maybe we're looking at the wrong end of the telescope. Because what you clearly seem to have in this era is a more political, more real... I mean, the old saying is you follow the money, isn't it? So let's follow the money and see what happens in the 1600s. Now, what I've realised, I've got all these lovely slides, drawings and all that kind of stuff, but they're not in order. All right, so this could be quite amusing. I'll try and... it's nice to have something to look at, isn't it? And what I've done, I've taken some of the drawings here from this book by Robert Shaw. Which obviously I'm a little bit biased because I edited it and published it. But I think it's fantastic because this explains here about a lot of the tragedies that took place and how the authorities turned on their own population through a number of things. All right, so let's just have a quick... What I'm going to try and do now is just a quick potted history of 16th century. Hang on one second. 17th century, sorry, 1600s. And 1700s, don't normally have notes, but there we go. And I will say I will make the essay available to download. I might throw some images in, but they're a bit random, so let's just talk for now, okay? And I look forward to the comments and the feedback. So the situation we're going to go back to is when you get to the 1600s, this is when you have the point when the Stewards take over. So before that, if you go back a little bit further, first of all, we have the Tudors. Let's see if I got relevant pictures here, because the order's all over the place. I can jump in and out. Yay, here we go. Well done, Angie. Thank you for putting these images together. So we got the Tudors, Henry VII, Henry VIII, Elizabeth I. Of course, like real history today, isn't it? So that's when you had the Welsh dynasty, or supposedly Welsh dynasty anyway, on the throne. And they had to make a lot of changes to the history because they were really worried about their position. As you know, I'm sure everyone knows, Battle of Bosworth, where Henry VII overcame Richard III. Now, what Henry VII had done, he'd raised the Welsh dragon standard. He got into the British histories, and he was going on the old legends and the old stories of how the red dragon would fight the white dragon. And you got Richard III, his symbol's the white boar, which in heraldry is the same as the dragon. So he was saying this is the reenactment, this is the time of ancient prophecy, all the way back to Merlin, when the red dragon will rise up and overcome the white dragon. And he raised his forces in Wales. And one of the things which Alan Wilson points out there is what people don't realise at the time is the Welsh were a mercenary country, very, very military, and their armies fought all over the place. All the big battles like Creçy and Agincourt being the Welsh bowmen, and there was various European kings using them as mercenaries. So when they took a force of a few thousand Welshmen there, it was a very professional force. So then we have Bosworth, and the problem is then justifying why they're in the throne. Now this is when you get into the era. Hang on, where's my? There it is. Okay. So the first thing they have to do is establish their history. The problem they had, that all their ancestry traces back to North Wales, to Gwynedd. They're going back to Llywelyn, and they're going through the Jasper and the Tudors, and that is their links. Then also, if you follow it back, goes back to Prince John, who became King John, brother of Richard I, who also married a common law wife into the family of Llywelyn. That marriage was annulled, and he had to politically marry into the French Isabel. But before that, he had a Welsh wife with descendants, and that's one of the claims to the throne, because that gives you a throne to the Plantagenets, the English throne through Richard, and it also gives you the Welsh throne. But in this case, the Welsh throne is a reference to Gwynedd. And one of the things I was shocked at, if you look at the old maps, Wales is not the whole country. It's not the area we call Wales today. Wales was just that bit around Gwynedd, around the top, and down the west towards Dyfed. That was only Wales. The rest was not included. A lot of it was the Marches, the Vale, these different areas. Some of it was Crown territory already. It was a much more complicated situation than the one we normally deal with. I know it's not, it's. But one of the things which has struck me more and more as looking back at this is this idea, I'm just going to throw this in slightly, is the marches themselves. Because if you look at the marches, what you're talking at there is this idea of Norman lords ruling Wales. And this is another one of those, well, it's a myth really, it's an image that we're given. Let's have a look at the situation. How long does someone have to be part of a country? I mean, modern day citizenship, you could come over and after a few years you pass some exams and wherever it is, you become a British citizen. My own wife Angie, she's now a British citizen. Is she British? Is she Welsh? I mean, she getting into the culture, learning the language, all that kind of thing. So what about our children? Are they Welsh? They, two of them born in Wales. Arnie came to Wales when he was 1, so they've lived almost their entire life in Wales. They play for the local rugby team, in the Welsh school, Welsh accents, in the Welsh songs, in the Welsh culture. Their dad rams Welsh history down their throats all the time. So are they Welsh? What about, say they marry a local Welsh girl, one of the boys, and they have children. Are their children Welsh? One point I'm trying to make here is that the number of Normans who came into Wales was tiny, absolutely tiny. The stories talk about 12 knights. I mean 12, not 1,200 or 12,000. 12. Obviously they had, soldiers with them and recruits and maybe local mercenaries and wherever it was. We're talking a tiny, tiny number of people. And after years and years of struggle, the longest armed struggle anywhere in the world, over 350 years, was the struggle between the Welsh and the Normans. People should be more aware of that. And it was not going anywhere. They had captured the castles along the south coast. They never made their inroads. All these famous uprisings, Llewellyn-Bren and all these kind of people and the battles. This well-recorded history, which is just ignored, and it's just called Norman rule. But if you're a Norman lord and you marry into a local family, the most famous example is Coity Castle, whereas one of the Normans was not allocated any land by William, and he basically said, right, not William, but whoever was in charge at the time, you go out and capture your own area. So he took his own small army, and off he goes. He gets to Coity Castle, and he's besieging it. The king of the castle comes out, sword in one hand, daughter in the other hand. Well, daughter's hand. He didn't lift his daughter over his shoulder. Her hand in one hand, the sword in the other hand, and basically gives the choice. What do you want to do? Do you want to fight me and have a bloodbath overtaking this castle, or do you want to marry my daughter and become part of the Welsh nobility? And this happened all over the place. So I really think we need to have a rethink about, when we talk about the De Clares and all these great Norman families, for a start, half of them are Bretons anyway, they're Britons. How much of that is actually Norman rather than Welsh? I know if they have children, their children are Welsh, surely. And then their grandchildren marry locals, and their great-grandchildren marry locals. How long does this have to go on where they're just not called Welsh rulers rather than Norman rulers? So the whole thing about the map of Wales and how it works is really needs looking at again. It's complicated and it's difficult. And with the limited records we've got, it's very difficult to work out exactly what was going on. I'm looking at some of the comments. The comments are flying up on this. Excellent. Indeed, right. I'll catch up with comments at the end. I quite like the chat at the end. Go back through and have a bit of conversation. Right, okay, look at this. I can't keep up with it. All right. Right, so the situation then. So when if we get back now to our Tudor friends, so when they raise an army in South Wales, what the army was and who they were, it's not like modern times where you've got nation states. It's powerful people with holdings and armies, and they fight their war, and they win, and it's a dramatic change in the politics of Britain. The old lot's out, in comes the Tudors, okay? And this will have a period of stability. Then we go through all the Reformation, all these kind of things, and we have Elizabeth I, and eventually, sure enough, it dies out. It dies out. Then we go through this complicated period where the throne goes over to the Stewards. And this is, see, the trouble is, wherever you do in history, you always have to go back a little bit earlier to work out what you're talking about. So you got this strange guy, James I.
Daddy.
Yep.
No, Isabel Live 2.0.
Oh, thank you. Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Isabel. Thank you. Much appreciated. Oop. Sorry, they're all over the place, these now. So that's Elizabeth I. So he's the last, really, of the Stewards. What they had to do then was look around, and we could spend a month. I've just spent about a week. The whole thing about the Scottish politics at the time, why we ended up with James, his spurious claim. More or less, James I gets in, or James VI of Scotland. He's more or less the last man standing out of the Tudor descendants. He's got a tenuous link to the throne, but he's near enough, and he will do. And he'll follow the rules, okay? Right, so what we got now is the 1600s. We're into the 1600s. And immediately, sorry, let's finish off with the Tudors first of all. So the Tudors' objective is they have to change history, because at the moment they've got a claim on the English parts of England through defeating Richard, so his control. They got claims on that. They've also got claims on Gwynedd and parts of Wales through their ancestry, but they don't have a claim on the whole thing. And that's when the dirty trick was done by, well, a combination of Henry VII and Henry VIII, whereby Wales was annexed. You could argue England was annexed into Wales. It doesn't really matter. But it was illegal. They did not have the claim on the territories that they had. So they were aware of this. They're very nervous about this. And this is why, as Alan Wilson talks about a lot of the history that was in South Wales had to be moved to North Wales to fit in their areas. And one of the fascinating things I do, go on YouTube or something. Well, you're on YouTube now. So when you have a look at this, go and have a look at... I'll try and find some good examples. If anyone finds some good examples, please put them in the comments. There's quite a lot of quite cool graphics, maps of Britain, where they show how it changes over the time. You must have seen them where you've got like the Angles sort of swells up, then the Saxons swell up, then Wessex swells up, and the Mercians swell up. And you can see all these different coloured kingdoms with their... going back and forth, and you can see the map changing, different colours and that. And you'll notice it's like a sort of black hole, more or less in the middle of the map, where Glamorgan and Gwent is, where nothing ever happens. None of these, the Wessex doesn't invade it, Mercia doesn't invade it, nothing invades it. It doesn't expand, it doesn't contract, it just sits there, ignored and forgotten. And that, of course, is a lot of what we do our history about. Alright, so anyway, let's try and charge soon now. What are we doing on the 9 o'clock? Right, okay. Need to crack on a bit. I don't think we'll do everything tonight. But the 1600s is a massive era of change then. Because the Stuarts are then trying to establish their rights. And one of the things they very much want to get to is a control of all of Britain. I mean, this is the dream. And this the dream, as you look more and more into it, my contention here, it's the mercantile dream. It's the traders. It's the rich people. It's the City of London. They're the ones who need this huge free market to build their money and, pay for their wars and do all these wonderful things. All right, let's crack on with this. So we have the Stuarts. So we go through all the Stuart kings, as I thought I'd listed here, until we get to... yeah, we're all here, just a bit out of order. Excuse me. Hang on a second. Unfortunately, the names in the top left-hand corners where my face is. That's Oliver Cromwell, Oliver Williams, the Welsh boy. We got to the stage of Charles I, so we get to the English Civil War. And we can go through all the causes, English Civil War, all that kind of thing. But this is when the big change took place. So Oliver Williams takes the throne and becomes Lord Protector. And the Stuarts are out. And already the reforms are starting to take place. Now the key period, if you look at his lifetime, it all went very peacefully. And then after he died, 1658, is when we had his son Richard took over for a while. His son had more sense. I think his son was probably quite a decent bloke. He had no interest in being king or ruler or fighting any wars. And he just abdicated after a month. And he lived to his 80s and died in his bed. He seemed to have a fairly happy life as a mid-level gentleman, just living happily on his little farm. Yeah, the Square Mile still runs the show centuries later, yes. That's the language and everything. Yeah, well, this is what I'm trying to get on to now, right? So what we have then is the period, the key period, which Robert Shaw writes a lot about in here, Architecture Power Book, which I recommend, is the key things that happened in the 1660s, because this still affects us today. This is when our lives were completely changed. So first of all, we've got the most famous event, probably is the one that everyone gets taught in school, is the Great Fire of London. Well, this is a very strange thing, because the version we're taught in school about Pudding Lane and the Baker's Fire, catching fire and all that kind of stuff, has always been known to be Codswallop. There was parliamentary inquiries at the time. It was just ludicrous. A bakery was the last place a fire would start from. The baker's oven is designed to withstand fires and heat. The whole building, the baker takes special precautions. The the baker himself was bewildered, and he was totally exonerated. He was not guilty. Someone else was executed. The parliamentary report shows that the people behind this were actually foreign arsonists, French arsonists. They were the ones that, and the person who was getting them out of there was the younger brother of the king. Hang on a second, everything's like, whoa. Here we go, just show us a little cartoon a second. There we go, that's my little cartoon I drew for the book. They were capturing these arsonists, red-handed, I mean, literally red-handed, with a flame in their hands. That's where red-handed, I'm sure, must come from. And they were trying to apologise and explain their way out of it in French. They were captured, and then King James, the brother of Charles, he would come up with his special guard, his trusted men, and he would get them released. He would get these people, say, oh, well, he wouldn't say that. He'd say, I'll take them into custody, I'll look after them from there, and then they'd never be seen again. None of them were ever prosecuted. So why? Why is this happening? Why is this going on? The key is, that Robert Shaw points out, is that when Charles I was executed, when he was beheaded, because they could not reach a compromise to agree in this war between Parliament or the two dynasties, the Williams and the Stewarts, whichever way you want to describe there wasn't a civil war. I think they're calling it the Three Kingdoms War these days, aren't they? Whichever way you want to describe that, no accommodation could be made, and it ended up with the execution. Now, as far as the Stewarts are concerned, they were God-divined, God's voice on earth. They were placed here by God's will. It was not for man to remove them. So by executing their father, this was deification. It wasn't just regicide, it was deicide. They were killing a god and killing their father. And when they came back to take the control in the Restoration, they wanted their revenge, and by golly, they got it. They got the revenge. And that's the terrifying thing you read in this book. Just what a king would do to its own people is quite terrifying. The fire was the most obvious example, and it used to even say on the monument, the London monument used to explain that the Catholics started the fire, but that's been removed for political reasons. So there's an example there, our history being changed, going back over the years. The plague, an ordinance was passed to show, to ban all cats and dogs, so the rats proliferated. Robert Hooke at the time, while he'd doing his research, he'd looked into how the fleas and everything seemed to be responsible for plagues, and ships were encouraged from these plague-driven areas into an area where there were abundant rats, and people were not allowed out of the city. I mean, this is how barbaric it was. Wars were started with Holland, totally unnecessary wars, just to create a war, and then the famine that comes with it. So you've got fire, the Great Fire, you've got the pestilence with the plague, you've got war, you've got famine, you've got the four riders, and this is what's charging through at the time in the 1660s. I remember the other things that happened in this period with King James, going back slightly. This is when the first Bible, the one we're all familiar with, the King James Bible, when the Bible gets translated into English. This all happens in this period. Massive important things. It seems to me, unless I need more research, people out there, this is when the English language itself was more or less, created really, standardised. This is when, because up until, people in Ireland didn't speak English, people in Scotland didn't really speak English, the Welsh didn't speak English. How many people in England actually spoke English? The West Country probably didn't. Look at all the regional dialects you're still familiar with to this day. Everything was changing in this period, in a very short period of time. So, of course, the situation we have then is the Stuarts are more or less declaring war on their own people, and in particular, the city of London. This is where this the design of this cover comes in. You can see this is the lion, which you see on the Royal Standard. So the lion represents the city. You still see it to this day. And it's attacking the unicorn, which represents the kings of Scotland. And if you look on the Royal Standard, you will notice that the unicorn's got the chains around it. And this is supposed to represent the fact that the ancient Scottish kings could capture anything. It seems more symbolic to me that it shows you who won. One's in chains and one's got the crown on its head, right? Well, you now have the lion now has the crown and the unicorn has the chains. So, it seems pretty more obvious that this battle between the lion and the unicorn. Certainly the rhymes, Robert points out, the rhymes and songs of the time showed how the idea was the lion and the unicorn chasing each other around, fighting this battle for the throne and for the power. So this is the power that goes on. Now, the problem is that they put the Stewards back in. And one question you have to ask is, who are these people who get to decide when royalty changes? For example, I know these are discussions in Parliament, but they're just very much window dressing. These things are decided behind the scenes. Who is going to become the next king? In those situations, who is deciding? Because it got to the stage where Charles II was just a disaster, and he was so unpopular, he's most likely poisoned to death. I mean, it was the list of possible suspects of who would have killed him is so long. Oh, hang on a second. Let's put a couple of these up. Oh, yeah. So I'll just run through. Let's just run through a few of these pictures since we got them here. Okay. All right. So there's my drawing. Is Charlie II in his full glory, dressing up. This is the man behind it all. This is the one. This is Henry Cecil. Cecil. Oh, hang on. Said that with great confidence, pretty sure. Henry Cecil. He invented the British intelligence network, if you like. He's a hangover from... He'd been there for a long time, and he was running the show behind the scenes, making sure that to try and keep the stake... I tell you, it reminds me of this guy, as if... I was talking about this the other day with my cousin Neil and that. Thank you. I was lovely to stay over there and seeing Zach and Claire. Wonderful. And how many people out there remember the story, the TV series Yes Minister, where you had the wonderful Jim Hacker MP, all very naive and full of ideas and all the things he was going to do and all these policies he's going to bring in. And meanwhile, he got Sir Humphrey and Bernard, the civil servants, who were making sure that no. And they're very, very clever. And that's what it's all about, really, how they cleverly manoeuvre him into making the right calls, should we say. And it's very funny. It's, that's very brave, Minister. Brave? What do you mean brave? It's subtly done. So this is the brains behind it all, Cecil here. All right, there's Charles II, trying to avoid being caught. He disguised himself as a washerwoman on one occasion. These are crazy times. I want to try and get across. You've got the supposed gunpowder plot, which Rob shows very clearly is pretty much a staged event. There was no real Catholic attempt to pile up all these gunpowder and everything. I thought I had a drawing of it somewhere. Yeah. This crazy idea the powder's all building up, and there's this bloke, Guy Fawkes, waiting to set it all up to blow up the Parliament, but they got a tip off. It seems to have been a very, very cleverly, what you might call a false flag or a staged event, as a good excuse to round up lots of political opponents. This happens a lot through history. I'm sure you're all aware of that. There's the drawing. You see the lion there trying to take the crown off the head of the unicorn. And there's the City of London in the background where all the money is made. And the trouble starts. So there's a picture of... this is the parliamentary report that Rob found and talks about. To inquire into the dreadful... not sure what that word is. The dreadful burning of the City of London. Together with other information saying something of popish priests and Jesuits and the increase of popery. So it's pretty much they are 1667. So they came up with this report quite quickly. And the other thing which came out equally as quickly and remarkably how it's physically possible to have done it so quickly is, of course, the maritime law, which I think up until a few years ago very few of us had heard about. And now I think everyone watching this probably is well aware. The fact that the way there were so many deaths and lost properties and things after the Great Fire of London, that they they didn't know how to deal with things. This is the official lines. They had to do a new law where it's maritime law is introduced, where everyone's considered a cargo that's been lost at sea, so they can work out the inheritance and grab everything. And this is what we live with today. And there's lots of channels and stuff about this. I'm sure people watching know far more about this than I do. And we're looking very much at the situation where the whole legal system was changed. It was done in a matter of months. So this must have been planned. There's no way that could have all been written in such a short time. And now we have a situation where we're all legal fictions and, all that kind of stuff. All that good stuff. Okay, so I'm trying to push on because...
You're full face.
Pardon?
You're full face.
I'm on full face, thank you, yes. I'll try and get the images ready. Now then, let's get on to... That's probably the longest introduction. I do some long introductions, but that's a particularly long one, I think. Because what I'm trying to get to is the point whereby books like this, for example, you can get this from Gyan. I don't get any commission or anything like that, just I want to share the love. It's Gyan, Gyan Publishing. You can buy this as a reprint. They do an excellent job, in my view. The paper's good, it's printed, it's just a facsimile, it's a copy of the original. And what you'll find, this book is from 1661. Well, the original was, of course. This was printed in, when did I have this? 2020, I've had this a couple of years. And this is by Percy Enderby. And it's called Cambria Triumphants, or Britain in its Perfect Lustre. Now, what you'll find in this book, this is 1661, is a very different history to what you find coming in later. I just want to get to this key, why that book of 1883 is so important, all right? Now, there's what jumped out at me in here is that already attacks are taking place, most notably by a historian called Camden, okay? And there's a number of occasions in here when he will say, where's the markers gone? Oh, I can remember them anyway. What he will say is that those historians out there who don't want to give any credit to British history would not accept this. And he's generally pointing out it's a defensive book because you can see the history is already changing. And one of the things which is changing is the removal of British history and British identity. And the timing is curious because Camden's writing in the early 17th century. You'd think this is too early because the big change doesn't come till 1700. This is how long the planning goes on for these kind of things. One of the things is another massive event which took place. We're going to talk about the Glorious Revolution, 1688. In 1694, to 6 years later, is when the Bank of England was launched. And that changes everything. It was set up, £1.2 million of stock or shares, whichever you want to call them, with a guaranteed yield of 8% per annum. This was the ultimate in gold line stock that people didn't even pay for. It was all a scam. That 8% has got to come from somewhere. And you know how money works? If I issue £100 to people and I want £108 back in interest, where's the £8 going to come from? There is only £100. This is why you create this machine which constantly needs the growth and expansion and led to the empire and led to all these other things. But that's 1690s. What fascinated me, if you look into who founded the banks and who they were, you can trace it back to 1630s Venice and how certain bankers, partly in disgrace, were chased out of Venice and Lombardy, and they became involved in Britain. So I would love to know more and more behind the scene, were the Stuarts an obstacle to setting up the Bank of England? And this is the key. Follow the money. Forgetting the political changes they wanted, was it the Stuarts and the old British history and everything that was in the way? Because it seems to me that the first attempt to set the Bank of England were about 1640s, and it kept failing. And it's only after all these changes that the Bank of England did come through. So suddenly, within this space, you think we've got troubles now, turbulent times. Within a few decades, you've got all the great fires, the disasters. You've got the standardisation of English starting in the Bible. We've got maritime law. We've got the Bank of England. We've got the divine rights of rulers is just removed and replaced with another situation. And still, there's more to come on this, because the key point, and I like to have the time to go through that Encyclopedia Britannica article, because it's very interesting how they describe things in there. Because what I would consider the most important issues, like some of the ones I just mentioned, don't get mentioned in there. It's all down to a practical thing. You know, war debts required a loan, and therefore, how could he raise the money to deal with the troublesome French and all these revolutions? It's the classic Hegelian thing, isn't it? You create the problems, you create the need for money, and you provide the solution, and the money's created. And we're still feeding this monster ever since. Okay, so let's look at just and I have to, oh my goodness, getting late. Anyway, let's push on a bit more with this one. So what we're going now, we've got through the Stewards. So Charles II, body poisoned. James takes over, another disaster. You know, he causes problems, he won't go along with what they want them to do. Don't forget, these are puppet kings, really. And he seems to think he's the divine king, divine ruler. But the one consolation is that the one compromise he made was in his first marriage, he at least portrayed himself as Protestant, along with his wife, Mary. So they were ostensibly Protestant. And they had 2 daughters who went on to become queens, and they were Protestant. There seems to be an issue here, though, because on her deathbed, because his wife Mary, who seemed quite happy with, died young. Well, she had all eight births, something like that, and the last one was one too many. Only 2 children survived. It was terrible times to childbirth, especially with the royals, with all the inbreeding and everything that was going on. You know, successful live births were very rare, which is the problem. So, even on her deathbed, or before she died, she went back to being Catholic. So this Catholic faith was very, very important to them. James, of course, went off and married again. And for whatever reasons, part of me thinks, he's thinking, well, all these infants dying in childbirth and my wife dying, maybe that's a punishment from God, and I need to be more strict on my Catholic beliefs. And he married his wife, I think, from Italy. She's a devout Catholic. And then, of course, he had a son who's going to be a Catholic son. And that's the problem. Because up until then, the heirs are going to be Protestants. So, all right, we'll put up with James. He's a blinking nuisance. But if he becomes too much trouble, we can get rid of him. Same as he poisoned off Charlie. And then the daughters will take over with their Protestant husbands, and everything's back to normal. And the city can carry on running. The mercantile empire can carry on running. This is the key. Create this universal country, which of course is the next stage that comes along, because what happens then, just after then, we've got 1705, where you have the basically Scotland's blackmailed. Blackmailed. What's the name of the actual motion that was passed? It's like the 1705. It's called the. Hang on a second. I did actually make some notes this week, so I think this is a key one. Well, the 1705, what was the name of the bill? Anyway, a bill was passed in 1705 to propose, the Aliens Act. It was called the Aliens Act. I thought it had a more interesting name than that. And the Aliens Act was basically blackmailing Scotland, that if they didn't toe the line and form a union, then they'd be bankrupted. All trade would be blocked with Scotland, and Ireland was already in problems. Right, so we've got the situation now. Let's try and wrap things together a bit. So we've got this situation where we've got, as soon as the change takes place, we've got uprisings in Ireland. We've got what's called the Williamite Wars, which are very important. Almost as soon as these changes take place, you've got the Irish Catholics are rising up. This gets complicated because William has to come in. So I'm skipping forward a little bit now to 1688, to the Glorious Revolution, which is an invasion. It's a foreign invasion, all right? The situation is there that James is not playing ball. He's now got a Catholic son, So there's going to be this chance of a Catholic dynasty, which is what becomes known as the Jacobites, which is Jacobite is just Latin for James, all right? So in case you're wondering where the name comes from. So you've got James, his son James, and his son James. They're all Jameses. So that's the Jacobites is all about. William is married to one of the Protestant daughters. He's the poster boy of the Protestant cause. He's the one fighting his wars all across Europe. He's fighting against the French. He's trying to get a grand alliance. He needs more armies. He wants England on side. And something which I don't think many people realise at all, he carried out a full-scale invasion of Britain. It wasn't a revolution. It was an invasion. He was invited in by city brokers, the important people of the time, invited him in to... Now, the subtle way they did it, it's very mealy-mouthed, these things. Because James had his Catholic son, there was some doubt was created whether or not it was his son, or whether or not an imposter baby had been smuggled in a warming bedpan, and he wasn't really royal. So William was to kind of come in and have a look and decide if the baby was legitimate or not. I mean, since when is General William a doctor who can decide these things? Hey? I mean, it's just ludicrous. But this is the way it's done. He had up to 35,000 troops. He was running campaigns across Europe. He was a military general. His fleet was over 100 ships larger than the Armada, which we're all told about. Was it 1588? This is 100 years later. 88, interesting, that number comes up a couple of times. Like the Great Fire, 1666. All the numbers seem to come into this, but anyway, that's for other people. So you've got, where in our history books does it talk about the Dutch invasion of Britain? We all know about the Armada, which didn't really come to anything, and got sunk by the weather and Francis Drake and all that kind of wonderful stuff. What about this other one that actually did invade? So the force was so large that in the end, James is more or less running for his life. He's fleeing. The army lands in Devon again, just like in the old history. Why they come from Holland all the way down to Devon, I'd like to know more about that campaign, but there we go. And is marching up through the West Country, and James legs it. They even capture James at one point, and William releases him, because he goes. This is going to be politically and legally a mess. He does not want him as a prisoner. He actually released him and said, "Go on, just go." Which is why the Jameses then over in France plotting their return to the English throne, and a very useful threat they are. But immediately we go straight into the Williamite Wars, because Ireland's up in arms, and then you've got this mad politics going on. Try and work out the politics of the time, where you can't give too much acceptance of Catholicism, because if he does that, then that's going to upset these people. But if he doesn't support the other, like Unitarians and different Protestant faiths, that's going to upset the Anglicans, because they've got a complete monopoly over it. Never mind the fact we got a completely different type of Christianity running in Wales and Scotland and Ireland. This whole thing is a powder keg, and this is the point. The country is becoming ungovernable. It gets worse. It gets worse. Because at least you got a strong general in charge of the big army, and he's off, King Billy, fighting the Battle of the Boyne, although I hear a lot of theories now that the Battle of the Boyne never took place. But anyway, James didn't want to fight, he legged it. Do you know if James's nickname in Ireland is not James the Great or James the Heroic? It's James the Colcher, which is James the Pooh, to put it politely, because of the way he dumped him in it and legged it. So the whole country's in turmoil, all right, as we're going into the 1700s. And remember, it's not far away. We're going to have the French Revolution, where everyone gets their heads chopped off. You're going to have the 1770s. You've got the American Revolution rising up against the king. And lots of people in Britain were supporting it. They wanted the idea of a republic. You had a tiny number of people who ran the country through the land. And that was kind of something people could live with. It's like the old noblesse oblige, You had this ruling elite who owned vast amounts of land. Everyone had their station in life. If you're going to be a farm worker, you'd be a farm worker all your life. You didn't have to work too many days, you get your cider, and life kind of ticked along. But that's not the vision of the world that the mercantile class had. Suddenly, the economy was exploding. The city of London, through trade, through industrialization, through increase in production, increase in populations, they were becoming richer. It's a big part of what Rob's book, and this is the real conflict that's taking place. You've got the old system. It's a bit like the ancient regimes, It's the old system of an aristocracy controlling everything with happy peasants, and the peaceful bourgeois. Suddenly, the money is being taken over by the city. And it's the same thing as on today, doesn't it? You've got money or you've got title. They've always married into each other, and that's the way the thing continues. So as we go into the 1700s now, this is where this starts to become a real problem. And this is where I think they have some luck. They have some luck, because what is not mentioned in Encyclopedia Britannica or most stories of the history of this time is what is happening to the history books. And that's what this channel is about. That's what I'm most interested in, the history of history, if you like. We can argue all day what's more correct, like I started the show. Whether or not you think the new version's right or the old version, the 1660s version's right, or it's just nonsense. That's other discussion for other days. What I'm looking at is what is presented as our history, how that changes, what the accepted view, the mainstream view of history is, how that changes. Now, what happens at this point is Edward Lloyd, who I think unfairly blamed for a lot of the trouble. I know Alan Wilson mentions Edward Lloyd as well. I'll just pop him up on screen on Wikipedia, because he's a really, really important character in all this. And I think, unfortunately, people like myself have got the wrong end of the stick with him sometimes. Hang on, I'll explain why. If I can spell it, it's got really weird spelling of his name. Excuse me sniffing, that's horrible. Right, okay. Hope you can see it behind my name. Hey? This is a massive lag in miles behind. What are you doing, Leon? You've gone back a bit. Uh-oh.
I'm just looking at
Oh, he's looking at something in the back. All right, okay. My face is in the way, look. Edward Lloyd. Anyway, you can't see behind my face. There's a statue for him. Now, he did... I can't emphasise enough how important he is. He was one of the saviours of the Welsh language. He was an academic. He was very accepted. He did a lot of work. He produced first works in Welsh. All sorts of stuff, all right? Here we go. Pioneering linguist. But this is the key thing for what we're interested in. In the late 17th century, look at this now, right? Lloyd was contacted by a group of scholars led by John Keigwin, whoever he is, Cornish antiquary, who sought to preserve and further the Cornish language. So that's great, right? He accepted the invitation. This is the objective of his work, all right? Preserve the Cornish language, which I think is fantastic. He also did there, and what he then did was produce this in 1707. So he's right bang in the middle of all these dates. All these things are happening. Just read as it is, I think. Having been assisted in his research by a fellow Welsh scholar, Moses Williams, Lloyd published the first volume of Archaeologia Britannica, an account of the languages, histories and customs of Great Britain, from travels through Wales, Cornwall, Bas Britannia, which is what we call Brittany, Ireland and Scotland. This is an important linguistic description of Cornish, noted all the more for the understanding of historical linguistics it shows. Some of the ideas commonly attributed to linguists of the 19th century, remember that, have their roots in this work by Lloyd, who was considerably more sophisticated in his methods and perceptions than Sir William Jones. Now, what he noticed, this is what's... Right, hang on, scroll down a bit. Lloyd noted a similarity between the two linguistic families, Brythonic or P-Celtic, which is Breton, Cornish and Welsh, and Godolic or Q-Celtic, Irish, Manx and Scottish Gaelic. He argued that the Brythonic originated in Gaul and the Godolic in the Iberian Peninsula. He concluded that as the languages were of Celtic origin, those who spoke them were Celts. From the 18th century, people of Brittany, Cornwall, Ireland, Isle of Man, Scotland and Wales are known increasingly as Celts. They are seen to this day as modern Celtic nations. Now, this is the key I think that his work landed on the laps of those people trying to push a new narrative, because whichever way they're trying to change the history, the problem is this strong sense of British history and British identity is making life very, very difficult for them. I mean, if you look at most English consider themselves Old Britons rather than Germans or even English, which kind of the term was coming in at this stage. The term British was being adopted. Instead of being the Old Britons, it was starting to refer to the island. Everything was being changed. Now then, on his travels, Lloyd developed asthma. So he died in 1709. Now, one of the things I've noticed is a lot of these major works, which become very important for making an argument, the person who actually writes them dies. And I think if you check through it, you'll see a lot of his work was published posthumously after he died. And this is also the case, I feel it becomes even more important when we talk about Origenes Celti, which I'll have to jump to because we're running a bit behind. Could you get that book? It's fallen on the floor, Leon.
Yeah.
Those two books there, okay? And because I get the feeling that Edward Lloyd was not trying to... his idea was not... He wasn't describing the origins of the Britons. And this is the key. Thank you, Leon. That's a bit nearer. That's better. He was just showing that the language are linked. Now, he was trying to argue that the Brythonic originated in Gaul. I'm not sure he actually did argue that. I think that's been added. I think his conclusions were that they were all Celts. And unfortunately, he used the term Celts. Now, at this point, we're used to, we're brought up with the whole thing about, the Welsh, Scots and Irish are Celts, and English... Excuse me a second, it's getting a little bit chilly. God, what happened to summer, eh? So much for global warming. Oh. My new chimeroglyphics top on. I'll top my chimeroglyphics top. Right, this whole idea of Celts was new. I'll challenge you now, and you can look at Professor John Collis's work, look at any other work. There are no ancient references to Celts being in Britain. None. In fact, there's no real mention of the British being Celts before this work. You can kind of hint at it in some of the 17th century books, but this is where it really kicks off, all right? And this is where I think this book, coming up 180 years later, is so important. So the point we have now is they've introduced this idea of Celts. The problem is, who are they and where do they come from? Same with the Britons. They've got to be Anglo-Saxon. And this is where narrative needs to be invented. Because the next disastrous stage in our list of kings is the introduction of the Hanoverians. Now this is where things... excuse me. Press that. This is where it becomes a real disaster. Because as bad as the Stewards were, the Hanoverians seem to have been worse. I thought I had pictures of those. Oh, well, never mind. I think you all know what Georgie and all those look like. This is where George I, George II, George III, they're from Hanover. They were obviously a Protestant state. So their politics were in line with Britain in that they both were opposed to France and Catholicism, and, they fitted the bill. And they reckon 56 better candidates were passed over to get to George because George fitted so well. Now that was 1714. Immediately the British people were having none of it. Immediately you got the 1715 Jacobite uprising, largely in Scotland, which was coming all the way down into England as far as Derby. If they'd have pushed on, there was so much support in Britain, there's every chance they could have overturned the throne there and then, and how different our history would have been. But they bottled it for whatever reasons. That's another interesting story. and gave up. Later on, we had, of course, 1745, the big Jacobite rising with Culloden, all that kind of stuff. The country was up in flames. And this, I'll argue, is why they had to. They had to invent a new history. They had to get a lid on things because the options available to them were stark. On one side, you've got Irish uprising, Welsh uprising, Scottish uprising, English uprising, different areas, particularly the West Country. They're all firing up and asking, why have we got a German king? Why have we got foreign rulers? What's wrong with our own British kings? What's wrong with our own British history? It's like a nightmare. All these wonderful plans that were coming together, all this trade networks, all this... if you go through this period, they've just taken control of Gibraltar, Minorca, doing deals with the Dutch over access to the Far East. We got, Duke of York, second son James, has negotiated New York with the Dutch, from New Amsterdam. Everything's happening in this period. It's absolutely crucial. Settlement of America, worldwide trade. And it's all going to be blown. It's all going to be ruined because the people have got this crazy idea that they want to rise up and put their old-fashioned British king back on the throne. The Stewards, who believe in divine rights of kings, they believe every person in their faith. They don't want the city. They don't want the mercantile classes. They don't believe in anybody can become rich. And if you got the money, you can buy yourself a big house, put the clothes on, as you're important as the next one. It's a complete philosophical disaster. And history is the key weapon behind this. And this is the point where they've latched onto Edward Lloyd's work and gone, yes, this is what we need. We'll introduce this idea of the Celts. The Celtic myth gets introduced. Also, the Anglo-Saxon myth. The idea of an Anglo-Saxon invasion. All these kind of things. It's now they get introduced. The schools change over at that point, and they start... this is where this bizarre situation where the posh schools, if you like, the public schools confuses foreign people, the private schools. Anyway, the elite education system concentrates on teaching Greek history and Roman history and pushes the British history out. It stops being taught. It's hardly taught at all. I mean, one of the things, there was the odd thing like Craddock's speech to Claudius that was taught in schools, some of the heroic moments from the past, but the whole British kings and particularly things like Arthur and stuff, all this. See, Arthur's more complicated, he has to survive, but all that British history goes. All that, all those eras disappears. You read Shakespeare, which is slightly earlier. He's Elizabethan, so he's just before, at the end of the Tudors. He writes Troilus and Cressida. He writes a play about ancient Troy and the roots. All that's gone now. That's disappeared. I mean, the play he wrote about the comet, I mean, that doesn't even get recognised anymore, really. It's been pushed out and pushed out and pushed out. The problem they had is that nature abhors a void. And what's really weird, and one of the things I've been trying to study now for the last few weeks, is this whole thing seems to dry up. There's nothing much happens on that front. I mean, you got things like Napoleonic Wars and obviously colonial revolutions. You got the French Revolution. I guess there's enough things going on to distract people and not to have to worry too much about it. But some of the other thing I like, which I've covered in another evening as well, is to talk about. This is where Edward Gibbon comes in, so useful. This is in that period Edward Gibbon basically invents his Roman history, but that's another story. The one that's more interesting now is one of one of the ones. I'm getting to the end now, okay? But this is the key point, the long preamble to get to where we started, which is where this book. I should take my homemade cover off. Show you the original book. It's rather nice. Oregon is Kelty, and you'll see that particularly volume 1, you'll see how much I love this book. I've studied it in great depth. I've got loads of notes all through it, and it's just so fascinating because what he does, what this book does, it fills the void. He creates a history for the Celts. He invents it. He invents a British history. And what's amazing, and you can see this when his other mate's in trouble. This is Bishop Stubbs, and he's actually the one pulling the strings. Because one of the things I noticed about this book, if you look in... Where's this come from originally? Oops, excuse me, 1883 is published. What it has in the front is a rather extended introduction called a preparatory notice. I hope you can see that. Because what this does in here is explain that Edwin Guest was not really a historian. This is where I think is a little bit like the situation with Edward Lloyd. What he'd done is some research which fitted a political need. Now, if you go through this history here, I didn't mean to type these up. It'll be in the essay anyway. I put these quotes in there. But his background was, let's see if you can see that, was looking at English rhymes. You can't see it very well. All right, okay. Well, I have to try and get a copy of the book. It's very difficult to find. See, what he did a work on English rhythms, published in 1838. In preparing the materials to which he was obliged, pioneer as he was in this branch of study, to undertake the labour, no light one, of examining for himself the manuscripts of early English poetry, few of any of which had been at this time edited. So that was his background. He was not really a historian. The other thing you find when you read through this description, which is mostly written by Bishop Stubbs, the one who Alan Wilson always calls a religious nutter, is that sorry, I shouldn't read a book when I'm talking because I'm so obsessed with books I get distracted. He was a lawyer by trade, and he'd done some research. He did not, it seems, want to be a historian. He was pushed into this. As it says here, he was persuaded by his friends, you know. This was very important, and he was, and I think he was very much the person who fitted the bill for what they wanted. He had the right credentials, he's the right kind of person, and he'd come up with some ideas which fitted in really well. Like, for example, he learnt Welsh language, he learnt literature, and he did a lot of in-detail research. Now, if you read this description of him, I'll just read any bit, really, I suppose. They're just extolling how wonderful he is. The next year, 1850, the Institute met at Oxford, and Mr. Guest again delivered a discourse following the same line of investigation he had opened at Salisbury, but adapting it to a still earlier period, that anterior the occupation of our island by the Romans. He was even inventing Roman history, okay? The title of the paper, On the Belgic Ditches and the Probable Date of Stonehenge, indicates its subject. I was not fortunate enough to hear it, having to make my choice between the historical and architectural section, which is sitting at the same time. It strikes me on perusal as scarcely so brilliant as its predecessor, but it is hardly a less valuable contribution to early history and its conclusions as to limits of the Belgic settlements, and Old Sarum having been their capital there. And it goes on and on and on. And he goes through the Welsh history, the British history. About what he does, the bit I'm looking for here is with the asterisks. What he's right. Sorry, the point I'm trying to get to. In here, they're trying to find the exact quote. He is thanked for being the discoverer of English history. It didn't exist before he invented it, and it gives you some ideas of the ways he did it. This was to be done by a careful and discriminating examination of geographical names, mythological traditions, and ethnological associations, coupled with bold and ingenious speculations in philology, and the interpretation of ancient monuments. She's more or less got a free hand. He also talks then about the Cimmeri and the Ligurians of the outside world were to be identified with or distinguished from the Cambrians and Lloygrians of Celtic legend, and the line draw that connect or separate the Britons and the Basques. Here, however, unfortunately, we lose the guidance of the master's hand. We have the links of his chain of argument, but the penetrating genius that would connect them and make them conclusive is withdrawn. And it says here, anyhow, as the first draft has been destroyed, and the second was never completed, it was impossible to reproduce a perfect arrangement. All that to be found is to give an entire. It says in here that, this is the bit I want to do. No attempt has been made, and it would obviously have been imprudent to attempt it, to manipulate the argument or to interfere in the slightest degree with the language of his work. It appears exactly as it left Dr. Guest's hands, except in the matter of references and a few indications in the notes of the places the argument is presumed repeated or referred to. It was perhaps rash to undertake the publication of a work written by a friend with whom we were not in continuous intercourse, which was only half completed, and which, from the peculiarity of its construction, did not help us much in the work of redaction. But if the editors must plead guilty to the charge of temerity, they may confidently assert the integrity of the text of which they are responsible. They didn't check it, they didn't change it, they didn't compare it or research it or anything, they just printed it. The work itself was one which could be completed, could be adequately presented only by the author, who's dead, don't forget, he's died, to whose clear head and steady eye the idea that he had conceived was constantly and distinctly present. Whilst it desiderates the want of completion, the world may still find pleasure in examining the points which deep learning and thorough enthusiasm, acute insight, unsparing labour, and a lavish genius of some Latin word have done so much to illustrate. To Dr. Guest's many friends it will be a source of mingled pleasure and regret, and whatever judgment they may form upon the countless subjects touched on in the course of argument, they'll be glad to renew acquaintance with him through a work which bears so characteristic an impress of his genius, his faith, and his devout labour. It does explain in here how they didn't, it's not been properly edited or checked. There was an incredible rush to get this book out. Origenes Celtic, 2 volumes, massive. And it is a wonderful read. I mean, it's very creative. But what struck me was that the original's destroyed, the author's died, we've got no actual way of knowing what he really wanted to publish or even what he really thought. He was Bishop Stubbs, this guy, the religious guy, who was really pushing it, persuaded this Edwin Guest, who seems to me very honourable and decent, and I don't know what he was thinking. Maybe he wasn't, maybe he was a right nutcase, I have no idea. But he was just making his own notes. He was interested in English rhymes. He might not have even written this book. This is how weird the situation is coming to. So there's one... Oh, God, it's getting late. Sorry, I've rambled on here, haven't I? But it's one thing I want to just get on to is here, at the end of this, is that why was it so key? So now into the 1880s, all that stuff is long gone. They left this hole in history which needs filling about the Celts and everything. And this is where we get to the very unpleasant part of the motivations of these people, particularly Bishop Stubbs, William Stubbs, because these were real master race believers, and this is one of the problems they had. So all the old ideas that Britons had come from the Middle East, you know, they had to disappear. You couldn't have that. An idea of lost tribes and British people being Jewish, I mean, it was absolutely abhorrent. They had to create this everything Nordic, Anglo-Saxon kind of situation. So I don't go too much into that. But there's one thing I just remembered, which I almost missed out. And I just thought I would just cap this off, because I think people have a shock when they see it. Let's do a little search here. Hang on a second. I just want to give you one little Celtic studies. Alright, go on Wikipedia. Alright. So it's there, just to finish. Celtic studies, or Celtology, is the academic discipline occupied with the study of any sort of cultural output linked to the Celtic-speaking peoples. Okay, we see a little map on the right there, so the Celtic speakers are. Anyway, this ranges from linguistics, literature and art, history, archaeology, history, the focus lying on the study of the various Celtic languages, living and extinct. The primary focus of the Celtic languages currently in use: Irish, Gaelic, Manx, Welsh, Cornish, Breton. Okay. Let's just go back to the history of... If you look into how the subject started, that's what I'm trying to get into. Okay, let's go to the history of it. The basis of it. I think about different... every time I look on things on here, they seem to change. Oh yeah, it's Lloyd. That was bizarre. My cursor just landed on him. So there's Edward Lloyd I was talking to you about. He's the one who made the language connections. Then you got in 1767, you got the remains of Japhet, origins of European languages. Then you got the connections with Sanskrit, Greek, Latin, and many other languages, including the Celtic derived from a common ancestral language, which fits in with the migration stories. They all start off in the Middle East, Assyrian, and then you spread, Welsh, Tuscany, Sanskrit, all these languages are linked, so all that fits in. Any written in Latin, the work draws on the earliest Old Irish, Middle Welsh. Can't see the bit I was looking for. But anyway, the point is, it all comes down to the Hallstatt discovery. That's the birth, really, of the Celtic studies subject. There we go. Yeah, it is there. Sorry, I'm not going bonkers. I've got my glasses on. So if you look at the first part, this is where it all comes from. German Celtic studies is seen by many as having been established by Johann Caspar Zeus. In 1847, he's appointed Professor of Linguistics. To the middle 19th century, Celtic studies progressed largely as a subject of linguistics. Carried out further studies in comparative linguistics. No. Anyway, alright, sorry, I'll come back to that. I'll put it to next week's. But what happened was there was the Hallstatt discovery. That's the one. Hang on, let's just type in the Hallstatt. The point was they discovered this load of loot, and they decided that timing fitted in with the Celtic dating, and that's all that was needed. And that's where it all starts from. So you got this crazy situation where you got a place where no one actually speaks the Celtic language, is the origins of... There's no trace left behind. Anyway, okay, there we go. So that was a long old one there, wasn't it? My goodness. I've actually been a bit energized for that. I've been wanting to go to sleep all the time all week. Right, let's go back and do a little bit of the comments. So anyway, the overall I'm trying to say there is that the key writers in all this, whether it be... wow, there's loads of comments flying in. I can't keep up with them all. Whoa, wow. Comments are flying down. I don't know if I've just fallen behind or what, I don't know. But one of the things I've seen more and more through searching the history of history and how we got to where we are and how we get the versions of history is that the writers, the key names that are put in front of us as the historians, how many of them actually died. They either died... well, pretty much a lot of their work is produced posthumously. So, I mean, Edward Lloyd is doing his research into the linguistic links and all that kind of stuff, but at no point does Edward Lloyd try to change British history. There's no point Edward Lloyd was trying to say that the Welsh were barbarians wandering over from Europe. He was looking at the connections between Basques and Bretons and Cornish and Welsh and Scots and Irish, and you can see the links to the language. I don't think that was ever his intention for it to be used like that. The same with Edwin Guest, I mean, he was interested in names and rhymes and etymology, and he's looking at place names. And I think it's where a lot of E.L. Gordon got a lot of her ideas from. So I think you have to be a little bit aware of that when you read books like Prehistoric London, what they're building on. Because we do a lot of it in this channel. And it's a very interesting subject. Look at etymology and the roots of words. But you have to bear in mind, this is a sort of an angle, if you like. It's an area of evidence. And as I try and say on this, before people get too emotional about what is correct or what's not correct, maybe it was a case of Edwin Guest was an absolute genius, and he came along and he discovered this whole history about how the Celts drifted across from Europe, and how, you can read it all. I'll probably read it again at some point, just because it's actually very well written. It's a great book, really good fun. Second volume's just peters out into nothing, but the first volume I highly recommend it if you get a copy. And let's see, we're looking at the history of history and how history is presented rather than necessarily what is correct, okay? And I'm hoping that then people won't get too emotional about it. Right, okay, well, thank you very much. All right, I'm just going to scroll back a bit on the comments. Sue Evans, I don't know how far back. I can only scroll back so far. It's letting me only scroll back so far. How do I do this, Leon? Oh, all messages are visible. Okay, that won't let me go further. Ross is on location until he started the lockdown. I'll see if you've only got any questions or comments, this would be a place to put them in now, okay? As before we wrap up. 10 o'clock, wow, it's late. Arnie's standing there with his violin ready to play us out. Ron P, I think it's more simple. We're controlled by compulsive liars. They want to lie to you and deceive you about every aspect of your life. Yeah, but I think they've got a reason. I don't think they just lie for the sake of it. You can't rely on history, says Brad. Yep. You need to know why before what. Marshall, I've learnt more real history from Ross, Wilson and Blackett and Rob Shaw and everything at school. Thank you. Yeah, me too. Yes, there we are. I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure how to say your name, but there's Achmose Braloran. Rely upon God alone, all else will make sense. Shakespeare was created to blend over 120 different English dialects. Oh, I love that idea. I would be very interested. Oh, what play about the comet? Yeah, I'll do a little. I've got a copy of the play here. I do have it. It's called Merlin. I think Merlin the Comet, something like that. There is a Shakespeare play. It doesn't get into the complete Shakespeare collections. Yes, I'll get it out. It's yes. Thank you, please. No swearing, please, Ian. Yes, thank you for your apology. So they made plays to align it all. So I think that's a fascinating idea, because my personal quest, if I get a chance, and I'm interested to hear people's comments on it, is was the English language actually invented in the 17th century? But we do have older books. But a lot of them are in Latin and stuff, aren't they? Do we have older books in English? When do books start appearing in English? We got Chaucer. But how many of these are genuine? I think there's something going on there that we need to dig into. Only Greek history was written about in the Greek textbooks. If they had read English ones, they might have learned about local history. But the ordinary people would know what to talk about. David Church, yes. Marshall, not keen on Gibbon. No, I think he introduced Empress Helena's origins. Sue Evans, because in 1050, it was the start of the Catholics wiping out all the true kings and replaced them with their own. Alright, so we got kings before the Catholic kings. I guess it's even more complicated, isn't it? He looks like a BBC newsreader in that painting. Oh no, I don't know which painting we're talking about now. I don't think you mean me. The mistaken history is difference in history between people and places. Yeah, we'll have to have another chat again, Gavin. Ian Briggs, Brad, sorry. Edward Gibbon is most preposterous and a grandiose liar. I think he was just, yeah. I mean, I don't like to hold. I think he was an innocent in all this. I think he was just a fantasist. He was, he had this wonderful, dreamy idea of what ancient Rome was like and how wonderful it all was, and And then when he turned up and had a look and he got to Italy, he's like, oh my God, there's nothing here. This is really disappointing. And he just wrote this amazing story of this supermen with their super technology running the whole world, invented history. That's why the impression I got. Then I look more into it. I think it's a bit more to it than that. I think the faking began in Renaissance times before his time, when you've got the Italian rewrites, the Florentines, what would they call them? Firenze people. They were reinventing their history, and the Catholic Church needed to show ancient roots, and they needed this Roman history. I go with flamenco on this. It was created very much in that era, and I think this is a wonderful job, this romantic empire they created, that people like Gibbon, who'd been taught this at school, then studied it further, was so into it that then he really made this wonderful fantasy version of Rome, and it was perfect politically because it paralleled the burgeoning English Empire, where we had a British Empire which really did have a technological advantage. You really did have redcoats going around the world forming lines and shooting down people. I don't think the same advantage existed for ancient Romans, just because they're pretty much the same weapons, swords and shields, standing in rows. You go through the history as it's written, most of the great military disasters in ancient history, if we go with conventional history, Romans are on the wrong side of them. I mean, this is my pet subject for decades was the Romans. And you go through Caira and Lake Trazahem and all those massive slaughters of Romans. Very few victories, really. It's weird you got this myth about them. Anyway, David ap Hewell. They didn't invent the Celts. They redefined what a Celt was. Well, the ancient references to the Celts are that they were a tribe in the south of France. That's the only ancient references. So the idea of the Welsh, Scots-Irish being Celtic is an invention, I'm afraid. There's just no reason to say it. And the other curious thing is when they say their language originates in Gaul, it actually doesn't. That's a bit misleading. It's Brittany. It's the Breton part. And as we know from our reading of British history, starting in the 380s, there was a British invasion of Brittany, and that's been part of the same kingdom as Wales and Cornwall for a long, long time. Our problem is we look at modern maps, we tend to think of roads and motorways as being the joining bits and the water being the difficult bits, whereas in ancient times you've got to think of it in reverse. Much easier to move around by boats and ships and the key rivers and the coasts. So Wales, Cornwall and Brittany were actually very closely linked, a lot easier to get to than to say walking from Wales to York or something. Much easier to take boats, a lot more boats than I think we're credited with. Right, Taliesin, the lesser breed narrative. Yes, thanks Andrew Whelan, yes. Taliesin, Andrew, I see what you mean, but do you have much to learn about Uncle Dolph? I'm your Huckleberry. Right, dear Briggs, yes, thank you. Language goes astray, the more of the wine a glass of wine when you're watching. Yeah, I should have a glass of wine one week to this drunk, that'd be funny. My capacity for alcohol is so low. I have 2 slips and the whole thing would fall apart. PJC Zuba, new findings in Poland. Bukowa Gora. Oh my goodness, there's a name there in Polish. Gory Schweizeriski. Central Poland. Oh, please email me, Ross at cameraglyphics.com. Tell me more about that. I'm very tempted to tell one of my Polish jokes. It's not offensive. It's they'll say in World War II, but this long name here with all those letters reminded me of it. Say World War II, the Polish fighter pilots were the best in the world, and they had the best eyesight. Not only could they read the bottom line of the sight test, they could pronounce it. Yeah, all right, never mind. I did stand-up comedy for a while. It didn't go down well. All right. The Lloyd, the English, that came up today. And I did promise I'd mention it because it came up in a Facebook chat. I've been looking in my old dictionary, and Lloyd, as Wilson and Blackett point out, Lloyd is the moon. You can make all these connections with Lloyd being the moon worshippers, as Ian Briggs and Marshall Abrahams are showing here. They're the original English. And if you look, I've got it here, but I can remember it, the 1803 Welsh dictionary, it says in there that Lloegr are the ancient Britons living in England as opposed to the Saeson, which is how the Saxons are referred to. So in 1803, in a Welsh dictionary, there's a very clear division in England between Britons, who are the Lloegr, and Saeson, who are the Saxons. It's not the case. I can't find any reference anywhere. Maybe some of the Welsh speakers out there can do it. The common thing we're taught in school is Lloegr means lost lands. I can't find how that Lloegr connects to lost or lost lands or anything. And I think that's a red herring that's been put out there to reinforce the Anglo-Saxon invasion narrative. I don't think the lands ever were lost. Yes, don't be teetotal. As my dad always used to say, the trouble with being teetotal is when you wake up in the morning, you know that's as good as you're going to feel all day. Okay, looking at Brittany. Yeah, thank you, Ron P. I'm drinking plum, I spill most of it. Thank you, Andrew Wheeler. I can see it's that level of chat tonight, yeah. There's nothing like a Ross ramble, thanks, Holistic Media. I earn more in 2 hours than they have in 50 years. Well, thank you very much. Everything's been rewritten, going back to Noah. Noah's not a person, says Brad, so there we go. Even Noah's been rewritten, Sue. Yeah. Oh, we're reading these Celtae by Edwin Guest, available facsimile from Guillen Books. Thank you, Marshall. Imagine being called something you're not. Yeah, well, the Celtic thing, that's the thing. People embrace that now, don't they? My local rugby team, Pontypridd, became Celtic Warriors for a while. I mean, what can you do, eh? Right, sorry I'm having trouble with your word, Brand Laloran. The Nord comes from Noah, and if you understand the steps of the Temple Mount where Solomon got one ring to bind them. Oh my goodness, that sounds very Tolkien. Please tell me more about that. Turn to 157 degrees, go 666 nautical miles. Oh my goodness. You hit the Cabaret Mecca. Right, we're getting to some deep stuff there. Right, Marshall. Noah in Welsh means layer or shallow vessel. I contend that the word slipped sideways from the ark itself to become attached to the main flood figure. Brad's no atomic holes. Wow, right. Take your history much further back, you find the true answer. Yeah, you have to keep going back and back and back. I thought I'd go forward for a bit, for a change tonight. Right, okay, I think we're getting towards the end there. Oh no, there's loads more. Well, I have to go to bed soon anyway, 10 past 10. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed it, because it brought me back to life. I just wanted to sleep all the time. Great show tonight, Ross. There's a guy on YouTube specials on language. Might be good to look him up. Thank you very much. Another book to read is the Original Chronicle of Scotland. Sue Evans. If you could send me an email with the details, ross@cymraglyphics.com. I've never heard of that one. I'm trying to think of that title all evening. Okay. No More Heroes Eye, look up the Stranglers. Yeah, Arlie's into AC/DC. I can't believe it. Thank you, Lego. Fantastic, passionate presentation, Ross. This really does show glaringly the anomalies and misdirections of our history has been told for the last 200 years or so, yes. Give us a PDF for heaven's sake. So dark now that Ross will be reading the Mabinogion from the stars in the night sky. Yeah. Look forward to a chat one day with me. Right, okay. Mark Manning mentioned Beowulf in the Battle of Maldon, I believe, are early British English. If you read Wilson and Blackett, I meant to do something on this. Just he shows that Beowulf really is another retelling of the Gilgamesh story, and it goes all the way back to ancient Assyrian. So you have the first creature, and then you have the mother creature, the bigger one. Which goes back to Tiamat, the ancient Babylonian stories, and it could be that the story came back to Britain and then got adapted or changed or whatever into a Nordic story, but that goes on really badly when you say that, because not that many Nordic stories. Oh, and the other thing which I've noticed Alan Wilson's written about, and I think it might be in his notes rather than the books, and I've got to get back to Wilson and Blackett notes, which I will be doing next week. Slight detour tonight, okay, is that one of the things he mentions in his notes that I want to go more into is about the Teutonic history and where that comes from and how that's got its astronomical links and everything. I think that would really interest people. And I think I'd love to learn more about that. You know, Odin. In fact, Odin's got one eye. We're back to the one eye thing. Does that tie in with Osiris, ancient Egypt? Fascinating subject. Perhaps I'll kick on with that one next week. Yes, Marshall says, Enderby, the last unbiased historian of British history. Yeah, and it's quite sad to read in it there. Is if you look at... there's a number of things... Which I should have had the quotes ready, would have been better, but there's a number of points in the book where he points out a part of history that's well known. He says, but those people who are trying to knock British history, or those people who are not fans of British history, and he mentions Camden particularly, you know, they try and write this out. So it's even happening then. He's very aware of it. So, book published 1661, presumably written in the 1650s. Already, the attack on British history is happening, and the stories are being pushed out. So we have to keep going further and further back to work out who and when. And also say, well worth, maybe someone out there would like to look into it. I haven't got time to do everything, but anyway, that Italian guy who anyway, they first started, really surprised me, the Bank of England. They started trying to set it up in 1642. And it wasn't until 1692 when the conditions were right for them to push it through, get away with it. So what was happening up here? Because, I mean, you notice, the Bank of England's on Lombardy Street, isn't it? You know, Lombardy is the place of Venice with the old banks. The word banks is supposed to be Italian word, banche. It's where the benches used to sit on. So it all ties in. And you'll find that with Rob Shaw's book there, where he shows that link goes all the way back to Lombardy and Venice, and before that all the way back to Egypt. And you can see the whole of London, the city of London, is laid out to match the siren journey and the eye. I'll perhaps do something on another thing on Bob's book at some point. Ross, look out, David Ap Hewer, look out for my upcoming Facebook group post with the true meaning and origin of Celt. Okay, like I said, it's been redefined and not invented. I will prove it. All right, look forward to seeing that. David Ap Hewer. Sounds like the gauntlet being thrown down. Okay. David Mosley. Hey, David. All right. Love to do something by them with Ross on vocal and I doing Dave's keyboard on violin. Wow, yeah, let's do some more music. Yes. We'll get back into the music again. That's right. What about the Saxon toe? One next to the big toe. Bigger, I watched a documentary. I don't know about that one. I can never tell if people are winding me up. Tell me, David Church, tell me more about Saxon toes. The only thing true in our history has all been a lie. Alright, okay. One of the new videos in Polish about that mountain with barrows on YouTube channel. Alright, I'm interested to hear more about the Polish links. Wow, there's loads more comments. Alright, well, thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to have to wrap things up a bit now. I think Arnie's gone to bed. I've lost my violinist.
I was just there.
Is he still here? Are you ready, Arnie? Yeah, we'll have to get some more up-to-date contemporary music going on a thing. Oh, I was going to say something else then. Yes, thank you very much. We've been sent some instruments, and I need to plug the company that sent them. There's a gift. So we got the whistles out. They've already been out. Sorry, we messed up the packaging a bit because they are for playing. And the kazoo as well. You've been playing the kazoo. So we'll try and do some tunes with the flutes and everything. So thank you very much for that present. Want a quick tune on?
Alright, just quickly.
Just isn't it nice you can just pick up instruments and play them? Wish I could do that. Great show, great company. Yeah, good chat on the comments. Thank you very much. I like to see it. It's nice and polite and constructive.
Doesn't really go that high.
Doesn't go high. Raspida cantorion. Ogionovi. There we are. The flutes work. Alright, so we had a record crowd on tonight as well, so thank you very much again. And I'm back into the flow. So this week, I'm just going to tell you, there's hey, very good on. Thank you, Arnie B. Hello, Zavi as well. It's very late. Cat's here. Oh, we have the cat on screen. Everyone loves seeing the cat. You can't. It's dark. You have to bring the cat down here.
The cat's a black cat. You can't.
Come here, Mimi. Oh, as you can see, she's really keen to be on pictures. Oh, pick it up, Mimi. Never work with children or animals. I seem to spend my whole life doing both. Oh, you could see her, look, as well, look. She loves me, really. She got my... Thanks a lot, Mimi. She follows me everywhere and then embarrasses me in front of the camera. Yes, the black cat found us. That's a strange story in itself. Oh, yeah, this week, going to be out and about, having a bit of fun, a bit of relaxation with Robert Langdon. And I haven't shown his new book. And he has a new book out. I'll do a separate video all about Stonehenge and all the nonsense we talked about that, 13 great myths and how he explains it. And it's absolutely fantastic. And I should have it in front of me. Sorry, Robert. I will give it a plug next week. But if you remember Robert Langdon, he's the one explaining that the dikes, like Wands Dyke, for example, and Offa's Dyke and all that, they are not military structures. They don't work. They've got too many gaps. They don't defend anywhere from anywhere. And Robert's theory is, or hypothesis, is they are ancient canals, which is curious because sometimes they're on quite steep slopes. So we're not talking the big, sort of, 6 foot deep canals here. We're talking something completely different. It's all to do with the water coming up from the bottom and osmosis and all kinds of weird and wonderful stuff that I don't really understand. Bob Morgan's done a lot of analysis on it. And I'm going to go up with the author himself, with Rob and Bob. We're going up to the Wands Dyke with a Land Rover, surveying gear, what they call them, drone, the whole caboodle. And we're going to make a film about whether or not this works. So I have to admit it's a bit above my head. I'm interested, and I'm just there to learn and film and ask hopefully the right questions. So look out for that one. And right. Oh, Sospenvark. There you are, Arnie. Do you got something else lined up for the violin? Go on a bit of Sospenvark. There we are. Thank you for the suggestion, Johnny. And I'll say good night to everyone. Thanks very much. Great turnout tonight. Thank you, I must say. Good to see you on board. I think you're new, and appreciate your comments. Very interesting. All right, Brad, we'll have another call as well. Okay, let's... Oh, Squirrel Sniper. Good to see it. Good to see you on board. Yeah, Miss Tosson. We do the verse as well. Okay, let's call... Oh, no, it's like getting late for everybody. Agree, oh. All together now. I can hear everybody at home. Spenvark, ber we are at on. Sospenvark, ber we are at loud. Agath wedi scrapo, Johnny Bark. Very good. Right, I'm going to say goodnight now.
I think I said all the teachers did a rock version of that.
The teachers did a rock version. Alright, so that's where I'm going to say goodnight to everybody. I'm going to actually close this straight up because I just realised it's 20 past 10. My goodness. Not really 2 hours of me rambling on. Well done for staying. We've got a record number of people still on board, so there we go. I'm going to cut this horribly. I hate hitting end stream when everyone's chatting away and it's so good. But yeah, good voice again. Thank you very much. I feel much better. And I've done me the world of good tonight, so I'll not be missing any more. So, are you going to try and do this, Arnie, without knocking the computer flying or breaking anything, right?
Aww.
Okay. Yeah, but you know, you're supposed to come from distance like that. Heather.
Hey.
Oh no, hang on.
Hey, I was doing it. You didn't press anything.
I didn't press anything. All right, go on, you have a go.
Oh, we've got a scam site.
Go on, it didn't work. I forgot it. Go on, yeah, go on. Go. Oh, gee, Sean.
What?
We got to do it. It's like dramatic, isn't it? It's supposed to look like we got loads of high-tech stuff. It can't just be your hand.
Got a bot, damn it.
Oh, we finally got a bot right at the end. We did so well. All right, we'll call it an end now. Okay, good night all. No star.